Duncan, the main reason I actually wanted to talk to you was I saw in the news, in a news story, that the company you were working for at the time, LM Wind, had just produced the world's largest wind turbine blade, about 350 feet, which is just mind-boggling. You almost can't wrap your head around it. And I am very curious, as many people who are following the STEM van would like to know, how did that come about? Why does someone need a wind turbine blade that massive? And how do you even get to that, to make that?
Well, the wind industry, I should say, is a young industry. When I first became the CEO of LM Wind, it had a Danish heritage, and they started off making boats out of composite materials. And then when wind started about 25, 30 years ago, they said, well, why don't we try a bit of that? And so, literally, that was the first wind turbine. And back then, it was the size of your arm, a blade was. And but people realized that if you could increase the size of the turbine and obviously the size of the rotor, then you would capture more wind, more energy. The higher it goes, the more wind there is in the atmosphere, and the bigger the turbine, the less turbines you need, and so the less foundations you need to build. And so ultimately, it became sort of bigger is better. And that's particularly the case for the offshore turbines, which have been big in Europe for a while, but are just coming to the US, where really it just makes sense because of the huge cost of them to try to have as big as you possibly can. And so the blade that you talked about, it's 350 foot long, and in meters, that's actually 107 meters. Oh. It weighs 50 tons. A single blade weighs 50 tons. And when we first had the idea of building this, I went to my chief technology officer and said, surely there must be some limits as to how big you can go. And he said, no, not from a design standpoint. He said, there may be limits as to whether there's a big enough ship to take this blade to where it needs to go, or there's a big enough crane to lift it up. And he was nearly right on that. 2 cranes to lift it up, but these things can be designed almost as large as you like, and that's in one sense what makes them so cool to work on, because if you're working as an engineer or part of the team helping build that blade, then you can see what you're producing, and you really have an idea that you're building the biggest in the world.
I think that a lot of young people are fascinated by green energy. They want to help make the world better, and but it might be a bit of a mystery. Is that, well, I have, what should I be studying if I want to get into this field? It sounds like a great growing field, like you talked about.
Well, if you think of a wind turbine, and we've all seen them, standing up in onshore, or may have even seen them offshore if you've been flying over them. And obviously there's a turbine, there's blades, there's a big tower, there are foundations, and all of that needs to be produced somewhere and brought across from wherever it's produced to the installation point. Once it's up and running, these things run for 25 years, and they need maintenance and service, and often quite a lot of work around that. And also the energy needs to be then transferred into the grid. And it needs to be transferred into a grid, into a way that makes sense, given when people need it and when the wind blows. So that's quite a kind of tricky balancing act. So if you think about that, there are many, many different sort of roles that you can play in wind energy that can appeal to people with very different skills. So if you're, for example, interested in engineering, then you can be involved on the blade side. So blades typically are made out of composite materials. And as you would imagine, you need engineers that understand aerodynamics. You need structural engineers that can help design the blade. And then you need manufacturing engineers that can help make it. And, you need teams of, in the factories, production managers, operators, people like that can manufacture them. If you're thinking more of the turbine itself with a generator and things like that, then, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, there's a whole piece around how the system fits together. So really almost every shade of engineering, there are opportunities in wind, but also very much on the manufacturing side, because you have to manufacture all the components, and then you have to transport them to the place where the turbine is going to be erected. So if you're interested in the sort of the civil engineering side, or that piece of how you actually figure out whether or not you're putting the turbine in the right site. So there can be quite a lot of analytics. I mean, with my maths background, I was always interested in that because it's quite analytical and it's about the data. And so lots of sort of interesting things there for people that are interested in doing things with their hands, people that like think about the engineering aspects, and people as well who just are thinking about the numbers and the analytics. And then there's plenty of jobs which are around process, and if you think of the process of keeping a turbine spinning 365 days a year, there's a lot of servicing required, and you need sort of good maintenance schedules. You need people who really care about that kind of thing, and often you may not need very technical skills, but you need an ability to help figure out problems and come up with solutions to problems, and some basic project management skills. So those are things that can be learned in many different ways, but can often just be applied to wind turbines. Often, for example, you find that some people have come from the automotive industry and do very well in the wind industry, because they're used to those kind of product delivery schedules, and producing things efficiently and quickly, and reducing cost, and all the things that are important in a business like wind.
It also sounds like it could be a fun career, because if you think about all of the places around the world that have wind turbines, for young people that might want to travel, that sounds like it could be a pretty interesting job. Can you speak to that? Do the engineers get to leave the desks and go out and be on site, or is it more a specialist type thing? So if you, let's say, wanted to explore the world but use your technical training, is there one particular role you should be looking at versus another?
So wind truly is a global business. It really is. Of all the businesses, and I love working internationally and working with different cultures, and I think I'm up to living in 8 different countries now. But when I came to the wind business, I said, wow, this by far is the most diverse and the most interesting group of people with different backgrounds that I've ever seen. Because you really do have to. For a start, the end market, the growth markets are in the US or in China, but are all around the world. Latin America is big at the moment, parts of Asia, all of Europe, offshore, Taiwan, lots and lots of different countries. And often the products are very common around the world. So you can be designing something that's going to be, installed in India or in China even. So you really need, teams of people that understand different cultures that can work together well. So some of that can be, working where you're based. For example, we had a US-based engineering center in Greenville, South Carolina. But those people, would be working very closely with the team that I had in Denmark, and they'd be working very closely with a team of engineers in India as well. And so, you had different cultures to manage, and often there was sort of travel to different places. We did a lot of the prototyping work, for example, in Denmark, and then we did a lot of the full production in India. So, you'd have, the last trip I made to India, it was great. There were 15 people there, and there a couple of engineers from Greenville, and some guys from Denmark, and folks from India. There was a Spanish guy from the factory who was going to have to build it in Spain, and you really get the opportunity, I think, to learn about different cultures and to travel and to go live different places as well. And that's one of the great things about the industry.
You didn't start in green energy, but you became CEO of a green energy wind turbine company. How did that evolve?
I like maths and history, so I said I wanted to do maths and history, and I got a place at Oxford, and they said, well, that's great, but you got to pick one or the other. So I sort of thought about it and said, well, I'll do history. And so I ended up doing a degree in modern history, which was fantastic for 3 years. And I believe that actually was a great training of the mind, because, you know, what it did is really help me digest lots of information. It helped me figure out, when you don't have complete information, how do you make a decision? And it helped me learn from mistakes, because with history, you see what happened and you see what might have happened. And, you know, that's a lot about life. So I look back on that now and say, well, listen, I might not be using, you know, knowledge of the Crusades or, you know, medieval history from the UK or France, but I sure as hell am learning and using some of those skills today, which is good. I decided I want to go into business, and I got a bit of finance training ahead of time, and I did a business admin degree, and then I joined a big American company called General Electric, and I said, well, listen, I'd like to go for the fastest growing division you have. Because I like, you know, growth and excitement, and that's what I did. And they said, well, this is fantastic. We'll go to management program. We'll put you in GE Capital, which was financial services. And I said, I didn't know much about what financial services was, but I said, you know, I love the idea of working internationally. And they said, well, listen, you can go work in Brussels, which is in Belgium, and a new country for me. So I thought that sounds pretty cool. And they said, why don't you start off doing the first rotation for 6 months, which is looking for companies that we can potentially buy or partner with. And so that's what I started off doing. I thought, well, this is fantastic. So 6 months later, I said, forget the idea of doing all these different things. Can I just stick doing this, because I really enjoy it? And so I did that for a few years, and then I decided, you know, it was fun. Having the complexity of getting teams to work together. And what I really enjoyed was seeing teams work together. I loved working internationally, and I loved businesses that were growing and changing. And so I said, well, listen, I mean, you know, rather than just sort of, you know, working to buy and sell companies, let me work on managing companies and running companies. So that's what I did, and I did that for quite a few years actually in that sector. And then a corporate decision, you know, was made that we didn't want to any longer be doing this kind of financial services. So, and at the time I was living in Australia. So, and I thought, well, listen, I mean, what should I do now? And I thought about everything. So I thought, well, listen, let's just hang up the boots of working for a big company, and you know, run something myself and start something up, and or just go and do something, or live in Australia, or go back to Europe, or go to the US. And I almost had so many choices, and I knocked a few off the list. And then I had a good network, and that's something which is always important. And somebody in my network said, well, listen, have you thought about, you know, going into renewable energy? And I said, well, listen, that sounds pretty cool. And, you know, I had at the time an 8-year-old son. And so I asked him, and he said, well, what's renewable energy? And I said, well, you've seen a big wind turbine, haven't you? And he said, yeah, that's quite cool. So that's how I ended up in wind and renewable energy. It was a little bit of a whim, and but some thought, but a little bit opportunistic, which I think is always important.
You've worked in, I think you said 8 countries.
Yeah.
Have you figured out what your favorite food is based on all those cultures?
Oh, well, listen, I'm an Englishman, so I love bacon. So I judge a country on a few things, but one thing is the quality of bacon and their bacon sandwich. And if you've never tried a bacon sandwich, I recommend it. I recommend that you do it. Bacon and egg sandwich. It's the way to go.
Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of young people. And I think one of the other huge advantages is that at the end of the day, you are contributing to our world using less fossil fuels, which is great for everyone. And like you said, it's a young industry and it's just going to get stronger and better and more opportunities. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, and the mission is something that everyone feels proud about. I felt proud about it. Everyone working in the business, feels proud about it. Everyone working in the industry feels proud about it, and everyone and you talk to as well. I mean, my son was he was 8 when I went into this industry. He's now 16, and he likes the fact that his dad's doing something to help the planet, because that matters, and it should matter to all of us.